and available to view on the council's website. Could I ask IT colleagues, not it, to start the recording? Okay, Christine, will pass over to you for the said and intimate apologies.
Thanks, Chair, and morning members. So, Councillor Douglas Reid.
Yeah.
Councillor Jim McMahon.
Yeah.
I have an apology from Councillor John McFadden. Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Here.
Councillor Maureen Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Ian Linton. No, not yet. Councillor Graham Barton.
Yep, here.
I have an apology from Councillor Barry Douglas. Councillor Neil Ingram.
Here.
Councillor Claire Maitland. Here. Councillor Drew Filson.
Yeah.
I have an apology from Harriet Johnston. Babs Mowat.
Here.
Alan Vint.
Yes, here, thanks.
Norman Watt.
Here.
Jackie Livingston.
I'm here.
See you, Jackie. Can I just double check, Councillor Linton, have you joined? He's online. No, not yet. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Christine. Before I start today's business, I can advise everyone that our friend Alan Vint, our Church of Scotland representative, has intimated his intention to stand down from his position in the Cabinet with effect from today. Can I just say on behalf of all the Cabinet members, Alan, would like to thank you for your attendance at Cabinet meetings and wish you all the best for the future. Also understand we have already had a placement and the report will be submitted to the next meeting of Cabinet confirming that position. Okay, thanks very much, Alan, for all your contributions. Much appreciated. Okay, now going to declarations of interest. Don't know if there's anything obvious, Drew.
Item 8, Biosphere. I'm a board member there.
Okay. That noted. Anyone else? No. Okay. We'll now go to item 2E, which is the Quality Outcomes Midterm Progress Report, Equality Mainstreaming, Quality Employee Monitoring and Equal Pay. And Alia Zahid and Donna Nielsen, will give the report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I've just got a quick presentation that Donna and I will run through. It's just because the report, you'll know it's quite a large report, so we thought this would be the quickest way to highlight some of the main issues in the report. Cabinet will be aware that the Equality Act 2010 requires listed bodies under the Public Sector Equality Duty to publish a new mainstreaming report every 2 years, with the next report of publication being this year. A set of equality outcomes every 4 years, and thereafter to publish progress every 2 years, with the next set of equality outcomes for publication midterm report this year. An employee information report together with details of progress made in gathering and using information to better meet the duty every 2 years for public authorities with 150 staff or more, and updated gender pay gap information every 2 years, and a statement on equal pay every 4 years. The Council, as providers of education and East Ayrshire licensing boards, are listed as a separate body under the Equality Act 2010 and as such are subject to the Public Sector Equality Duty. However, these requirements are incorporated into the Council's reports rather than having three separate reports. Appendix 1 is the East Ayrshire Midterm Progress Report on the Ayrshire Shared Equality Outcomes. It was agreed to keep the 4 overarching outcomes that Cabinet agreed in 2017, which were developed after extensive consultation. These were in Ayrshire, people are in a safe and inclusive communities. People have equal opportunity to access and shape our public services. People have opportunities to fulfil their potential throughout life, and public bodies are inclusive and diverse employers. To achieve these outcomes, 29 actions were developed and agreed to take forward. These were 12 shared actions, 5 actions in relation to our schools, 6 corporate actions and 6 actions that included East Ayrshire Licensing Board. Members will note that in the report, the RAG status has been used to track progress for the actions. Of those actions that have been achieved, 4 of these actions were achieved ahead of schedule, 14 actions were completed on time, and 11 actions are set to be completed no later than March 2025. You will note that the Council has made good progress even in the last 2 years of improving its approach to the equalities agenda. There's clear evidence that the majority of equality outcomes have either been progressed or are progressing successfully. We move on to the Appendix 2 of the report, which is the equality mainstreaming, which is divided into headings to cover information related to the requirements of the public sector equality duty, which includes a breakdown of population in respect of equality, an overview of our leadership and governance, mainstreaming and service provision, employment and employee development, and employee monitoring and equal pay, which Donna will take us through. There are specific sections that cover equality mainstreaming in education and information on our licensing board. The report is interspersed with case studies that cover the work that has been undertaken internally in our communities and in our schools. It also highlights the work of the East Ayrshire Violence Against Women Partnership and new developments in relation to mainstreaming equality, such as the establishment of a People and Cultural Forum, the establishment of Service Equality Champions, the establishment of an Ayrshire Black and Ethnic Minority Employee Forum, and this covers North, South and East Ayrshire Council employees, and the development of the Equally Safe Bronze Accreditation Programme. Some highlights in relation to education. The Rights Respecting School Awards. Our schools continue to work towards the 3 different levels of these awards, inclusion of and additional support needs, improving employability and skills, and sustained positive destinations for all our young people. I think I've done that twice. So some of our case studies. Equally Safe at Work is an innovative employer accreditation programme developed by Close the Gap, Scotland's policy and advocacy organisation working on women's labour market equality. It supports employers to improve their employment practice, to advance gender equality and to work and prevent violence against women. The Council embarked on this programme in summer 2022 and quickly established a working group to take forward the actions required to achieve bronze status. One campaign to raise awareness of domestic abuse and sexual harassment was the information placed on our bin lorries, which you can see a photograph on your screen, which go into the heart of our communities to inform residents of information where they can access help should they need it. This actually programme or campaign is going to be used as a national case study for Close the Gap and then highlight the good practice that's taking place in East Ayrshire. Africans in Ayrshire is our next case study that's been highlighted. This event was the first of its kind in Ayrshire and allowed African Caribbean communities across Ayrshire to come together and engage with emergency services in East Ayrshire Council. It was led by Police Scotland and they very kindly allowed me to attend. This event was highlighted some of the issues prevalent in the African Caribbean community, including instances of isolation, access to services and access to education and employment. We've now established a group called Africans in Ayrshire to ensure that we remain in contact with the community and to support the integration into Ayrshire and to ensure that they have access to goods and services. The Council has a lead responsibility for supporting this group, working to ensure they become, they have just actually become a constituted group, and there will be a point of contact for meaningful engagement and shared practice. Just a couple of case studies in relation to our schools. The UNICEF Rights Respecting Schools Award. We've got a number of schools that are working towards the bronze, silver and gold levels, and they've all achieved and done some fantastic work despite the difficulties that we faced with COVID. Staff and pupils have been focused on achieving their awards. And finally, Again, this is just some photos of the Skills and Learning 33 programme, the Developing Young Workforce Partnership Hub in Titchfield Street, Kilmarnock, established in 2021 and led by the Education Service, provides impetus for a refreshed and expanded focus on much of the ongoing work to progress delivery and implementation of developing a young workforce in East Ayrshire, while providing opportunities to work in partnership with the Employability Service and partners including social work, national training providers and Ayrshire College, to name but a few. And these are just some of the activities that some of the young people have been involved in. I'll now hand over to Donna, who will take you through the workforce equality monitoring and pay gap data.
Thank you. So as Alia says, the Equality Monitoring Report is part of the wider Equality Mainstreaming Report, and the Equality Monitoring Report is split into 3 areas of recruitment, the workforce makeup and employee development equality monitoring data, and covers the period from the 1st of January 2021 to the 31st of December 2022. In addition, we have incorporated our pay gap information for 21-22 and 22-23. Previously, this was done as a separate report. So we're required as part of our equality duty to report local government employees and teaching employees separately. And the report provides an analysis of trends in respect of all protected characteristics. And in addition, it covers areas such as maternity, discipline and grievance, and details of accessibility of employee development against key characteristics. So in terms of the recruitment information, there's obviously data within the report covering all of the protected characteristics, but I've just highlighted a few. So in terms of disability, of the 1,035 successful applications in 2021, 9.76% declared that they had a disability, and of the 659 successful applications in 2022, 11.84% declared that they had a disability, and both local government and teaching appointments showed a slight increase in those with a disability. So although there has been an increase in the number of people with disabilities being successful for post, it is still very low in comparison with the numbers of people with disabilities living in East Ayrshire. So we need to identify and support further pathways into employment for people with disabilities and carry out further scrutiny to identify barriers. In terms of sexual orientation, the information shows a slight increase in applications from the LGBTQ+ community between 2021 and 22. So it rose from 2.03% to 2.73%. And this may be due in part to the increasing number of people feeling more comfortable to declare their sexual orientation. And in addition, it should be noted that the number of people who did not report their sexual orientation reduced over the 2-year period from 23.57% to 17.75% for those who were successful, showing an improved declaration rate from applicants. In terms of religion and belief, the data collected showed an improving picture in terms of the number of people declaring their religion, with 24% being unreported in 2021, and this reduced to 12.67 being unreported in 2022. It should also be noted, however, that the largest group for both years was overwhelmingly no religion or belief, rising from 46.10% to 57.23% respectively. In terms of ethnicity in relation to recruitment, the diagram shows 5 main ethnic groups, as well as unreported, where people did not disclose their ethnic group, for both those who applied for posts and for those who were successful over the periods 21 and 22. There was an increase in applications from all ethnic groups between 2021 and 22. However, for those who were successful from minority ethnic groups, there is a mixed picture. So, for example, in the bit that's highlighted on the diagram, successful applicants from Asian backgrounds reduced for local government employees. However, there was an increase in successful applications for teaching posts. In terms of our workforce equality monitoring stats, again, I've just highlighted a few from the stats that are within the report. So in relation to sex, in 2021, 74.82% of the workforce was female, 25.17% were male. And in 2022, this gender split kind of evens out slightly in terms of its 75 to 25% respectively. It can be seen within the report that although the number of female employees is far greater than male employees overall, for local government full-time employees, there is a more even spread with an average of 32 to 23% split female to male. For teachers, the difference is far more pronounced with a 63 to 18% split between female to male ratio. And it should also be noted that there are a much larger number of female employees in part-time posts across both local government and teaching roles in comparison to males. In terms of age, the number of young people, which is in the category 16 to 24, employed by East Ayrshire has risen between 2021 and 22 from 369 to 399 overall. However, the number of young teachers being appointed has fallen from 75 to 57. Within the 45 and over age group, local government employees reduced from 57.71% to 55.13%. So a reduction of just under 2%. And then the number of employees in teaching for this age group also reduced from 34.38% to 33.81%, equating to a reduction of 0.57%. In terms of disability, 2.74% of the council's local government workforce had declared a disability in 2021, and this rose to 3.22% in 2022. And 1.37% of teaching staff had a declared disability in 2021, and this rose slightly to 1.47% in 2022. There are more females than males with a disability across both local government employees and teaching staff, and this correlates with the makeup of the council's workforce. In terms of ethnicity within the workforce, we've used the same categories as we did for recruitment. So 5 main groups and are also unreported. And the table shows that representation from ethnic groups is extremely low within East Ayrshire Council, with over 90% of local government employees being white British and 78% of teaching staff being the same. The total unreported has fallen very slightly over the 2-year period for both local government and teaching staff. In terms of employee development, the diagram that I've used just shows the split of female to male employees accessing development opportunities across the council. And again, this mirrors the makeup of the council as a whole. In addition, I've noted that the average age of those accessing learning and development was 31, and employees with disabilities accessing development rose from 481 in 2021 to 1,372, which is a really positive move. So moving on to the pay gap, and as said in the past, this was done as a separate report, but we've now included it within our employee monitoring data. So, and in the past, we also only had to report on gender, but there's now a requirement for us to report on ethnicity and disability as well. So the table shows that the gender pay gap has decreased slightly for local government employees over the 2-year period. In terms of it hasn't, but it's increased slightly for teachers. In terms of the ethnicity pay gap, this shows a negative for both years, for both groups, as the average hourly rate of employees who have registered as being from an ethnic minority group have a higher average rate of pay than those from minority ethnic groups due to the small number of employees in this group, i.e. 2% of the whole workforce. The disability pay gap between local government employees and staff, teaching staff, is very different due to the narrower grade bandings and fewer employees on the teaching scale compared to local government pay scale. In terms of the next slide, occupational segregation is when one demographic group is overrepresented or underrepresented among different kinds of work or different types of jobs. Within the report, the full workforce has been split into different occupational groupings. However, within this slide, I've just highlighted a few that have disproportionately high or low representation from our female workforce. So from the data, there's no real change in the occupational split for female to male representation in specific occupational groups over the 2-year period. For example, within business support roles, so that's clerical, admin, all of those types of occupations, there's an overrepresentation of female employees with 89.51% of people working in this area being female. While in craft, technical, engineering and facilities, the predominant demographic group is male. So occupational segregation is one of the main reasons for the gender pay gap. However, there's a number of other factors which we also need to consider. One contributing factor includes females traditionally carrying out caring responsibilities, meaning they can be forced through their personal circumstances to take up part-time roles in order to balance work and caring responsibilities, with part-time work traditionally being in lower paid roles, such as cleaning, catering and clerical occupations, thereby contributing to the gender pay gap. Another factor is gender norms and stereotypes, which will determine job and career choices. So finally, within the report, you'll see some recommendations and conclusions. So I've just kind of put a few up here. So in terms of recruitment, as part of the People and Culture Forum, we will analyse our recruitment data, specifically our applications, and those who are successful on a 6-monthly basis. We will also do that with our employee development data. In terms of disability, there's been an increase in the number of people with disabilities being successful for posts, although it is still very low in comparison with the number of people with disabilities living in East Ayrshire. So we need to identify and support further pathways into employment for people with disabilities and carry out further scrutiny to identify what's causing a barrier for them. Work in this area has started through reviewing our positive recruitment policy and also the work that's been ongoing with in terms of developing work experience pathways in order to build better opportunities to support people into employment. In terms of sexual orientation, as part of the People and Culture Equalities Forum, we will identify the appetite for an LGBTQ+ network for existing employees, similar to what's already happened for our BAME employees, and we will action this during 2023. In terms of employee development, the statistics provided give an overview of all learning and development opportunities undertaken by the Council's workforce. However, going forward, we need to look closer at the equalities development and awareness sessions being offered and ensure barriers to development are reduced as much as possible. And in respect of face time, as part of the equality monitoring data, we should also be providing information on career progression. However, at the moment, we're not able to provide this data. So as part of the FaceTime process, we had added a section on career conversation, and this was linked to our succession planning processes. And over 2023 and 24, we will be able to gather data in this area for reporting in the future. And around occupational segregation, we've already sort of gone over that. We know that a lack of flexible working opportunities can contribute to the gender pay gap, i.e. a lot of females in taking part-time posts but in lower graded posts. So we need to make sure that we've got a consistent approach to our flexible working opportunities and that they're available across all areas of our workforce to apply for. and we will also be looking at our kind of awareness raising of flexible working through our Equally Safe at Work accreditation programme. So that is a whistle-stop tour of the quality monitoring stats. So happy to take any questions if anyone's got any.
Thanks very much. An excellent report. There's loads of information in there. You know, I'm just, you know, one of my questions was going to be in terms of comms. I think this is good for staff and for the wider public, just some of the things that we're doing, and just wondering what we'll be doing in terms of comms. But one of my initial questions in terms of, right at the start, were in terms of the population. The population is getting worryingly older, particularly in East Ayrshire. You know, so is there any kind of recommendations that we're suggesting in terms of workforce planning? You know, I read yesterday there's a, you know, there seems to be post-COVID a number of older people coming back to work. Are we doing anything in terms of that? You know, part-time working, encouraging anything like that? Is that something we should be looking at?
I think through our work around employability and linking in with the economic development employability team, looking at the long-term unemployed and looking at different options and different pathways, we are trying to look at that area. I don't know, David, if you've got anything else that you would want to add there?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, the whole economic and activity area is something that we're focusing on, and obviously that's for the 25 upwards. We're looking at all, you know, the opportunities we can get to provide through the likes of the SL33 and other hubs that we're developing. So we are focused on that.
Thanks, David. Claire, then Drew.
Thanks. Just want to say it was an absolutely excellent report. In fact, thanks for taking the time to go over it with me. There's too many statistics in there to really start pulling out, and I think you've pulled out the best ones, but I would just like to take note in paragraph 17 that more people are giving us feedback and we're getting more data, and of course more data just helps us in the planning. So we must be doing something right if people are prepared to share their information with us, and it gives us far more accurate statistics. I know I said I wasn't going to pull any out, but there is one that's a bit worrying, and it's the long-term illness, and it's 30.2% of people in East Ayrshire long-term illness, whereas the Scottish one is 24.7. So that's a bit worrying for us to look at. And I really like the gender pay gap information. The only thing I particularly enjoy about International Women's Day is the International Pay Gap Bot. And if you're a lady, you should know what that is. It's probably the most accurate indicator you can see of how gender pay gap works in the whole of the UK. But this is excellent demographics, and it's the kind of thing that we could probably do a whole cabinet paper on in itself. So just thanks very much.
That's clear. Drew?
Thanks, Chair. Just to thank Elaine and our team for a good paper here. And just to advise that we had our first licensing forum yesterday. Licensing forums have been struggling right through Scotland apart from Glasgow, but we're still trying to recruit as many people as we can. But at that meeting with everybody around the table, great discussion, and we actually elected our youngest ever chair. So it's really looking positive for the forum going forward. Okay, thanks.
Good stuff. Eddie?
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, I think this is a fantastic report, and every time you look at it, there's something different that you want to actually look at. The point that you raised, you know, Leader, in terms of, you know, the demography and the age of our population is really important, because also when you look at some of the occupations there, you know, some of what we would call our former manual workers, our low paid staff are not going to get, you know, their pensions to 67. So whether that be some of our workers in roads, whether that be some of our workers in social care, if they're not going to get that to 67, we're going to have to look at some of the occupations about how can people still physically do them, and the conversations are really important and take place also with our trade unions. I think one of the other things that we as a council need to be careful about is when we talk about pay gap, making sure any time we compare with other councils, we do that like for like. This council has taken conscious decisions in the past to keep a number of services in-house. So our social care services are predominantly in-house, our early year services are predominantly in-house. These are predominantly female and lower paid services. and therefore when you look at our in-house pay gap, it's weighted by that. If you're a council that's chosen to externalise these services, they're not included in these figures at all. So local women are still getting paid, likely even lower pay, because they've not been paid in the public sector, but they're not included here. So our year-on-year comparisons are very important, but when we start comparing with other councils or other places, I think we should always make sure it's a like-for-like comparison that we're actually looking at there. But as I say, they're fascinating statistics, you know, and they're statistics that is really good at the end, that both Fiala and Donna, you can see their action points at the end of it. It's not just statistics that are there for, you know, for us to peruse over. We need to do something about it.
Thanks, Eddie. Back to Drew.
Just now, wee one, Chair. Page 36 here, the second paragraph. The 4 secondary inclusion hubs. Could Alia tell us who the 4 secondary schools are?
Sorry, I can't actually tell you at the moment because education wrote that part of the report, but I will find out and give you that information.
Thanks, Alia. Thanks. Okay, we'll get that information circulated to everybody, I'm quite sure. Jim, then Graham.
Thanks, yeah, thanks again. And a great report. Like it's already been said, the amount of data and statistics in here is quite astonishing. It takes a wee while to analyse them. A couple of things just for comment earlier. Again, it would remiss me not to talk about the amount of fantastic work that's done by the Violence Against Women Partnership in East Ayrshire, and that strive to get that accreditation for White Ribbon as well, equally safe at work stuff, and take the opportunity again to congratulate Drew Kyle on his innovative idea for the bins. It was absolutely fantastic. I'm really encouraged to see the statistics about employee development and that push towards e-learning. Is it voluntary or a big guiding? And I know there's flexibility within that so they can with the normal working hours, but are we pushing more folk towards e-learning?
We are pushing more people towards e-learning, and those who everyone that are almost 98% of employees can access e-learning, but those who are not able to, then we do provide an alternative like access within an office space where they can access the learning. And it's a mix of essential like courses that you're required to do for your role, plus also additional learning that would support you that's voluntary. So it's a mix of both.
Thanks. Graham.
Thanks, Dougie. It's more a comment. I'd like to highlight the work that the Equality Forum are doing at the moment. Joe McLaughlin's team are rolling out the digital strategy, and some of the feedback that we're getting through the Equality Forum and how we don't leave anybody behind. So that's a crucial bit of what they're doing. So I'd just like to highlight that and thank them for their work. I'm sure Joe is appreciative of what they've been doing. The Deputy Leader touched on the violence against women. We had a violence against women conference at Take a Bow last year. It was well attended. I think there was about 100 people there. But unfortunately, I'd done a head count, but only 15% of those that attended were male. Now, that's clearly the target audience for that, and I think we need to do a bit of work on how we get that message across. And I think talking about domestic abuse, on the 23rd of April, there's going to be an emergency broadcast. And now, sufferers of domestic abuse generally have a phone maybe hidden away. Now, this emergency broadcast, doesn't matter if your phone's in silent, it's going to trigger it. So I'd like to see if we get any communication going out, highlighting this fact. On the 23rd of April, please get that phone turned off so it's not triggered.
That's a big point. That's a very good point, Graham. I know it's only 4 days away. So we'll action that today.
Just to say, we've already seen some, you know, stuff coming out through, you know, like David Orton, and we'll make sure comms continue to follow up on that in terms of going forward. Sorry, our officers at the back, in terms of the violence against women, want to add anything to that?
Thanks. It's a really good point. I'll pick it up. I'm pretty sure it's covered, but we'll pick it up with the lead officer for the Violence Against Women Partnership and ensure that we communicate with all our key partners to share the information that there is a way of opting out of the alert. And so I'll pick that up immediately. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Mary. We'll keep members updated and on that. Okay, can we just go to recommendations in paragraph 2? Can we agree recommendations? Okay, thanks very much. Okay, go on to item 3E now, which is ASN holiday support. And Eddie,
Thanks, Chair. Morning again, members. Members, I'm taking, this report today, although Kevin, Wells has done all the work for it, because I wanted to emphasise the background that this is a responsibility across the whole council. It's not just the responsibility for Kevin and vibrant communities. Members, it's a short report, but it's an important report. It's the next step, in terms of response to what we heard, last year, where although as a council we had an extensive programme of out-of-school support over the summer that was inclusive for many people, including people for additional support needs. For a small number of people, feedback from them and from their families of those with the highest level of need was they felt that they were excluded from that. And many of the members here, were present and heard directly from, the parents and carers about the experience of that. As a council, being open, to listening, to what our, residents are saying. We then, engaged with the Alliance, who's a very respected, person-centred organisation, to do an independent review of the provision that we were there. And the review come back, although sometimes some of the messages were quite hard, it also come back with real ambition to say that we could move forward and we could move forward to be proud of what we deliver across East Ayrshire. So that's been delegated to our Children and Young People Strategic Group to look at how we take that forward and how we have a properly integrated support for children out with school so that they can socialise the same as everyone else can. In the meantime, we're clear that we need to make sure, and it was an important message, that we have something in place for this summer coming. And this paper is about how we put contractual arrangements in place to do that and actually deliver for this summer. But also in the model of doing that is important, that people said that some of the things that were important were familiar places and familiar faces to that. So again, the model that we're taking forward looks to achieve that as well. We intend to go with agreement of Cabinet with a direct contract to one of our very trusted providers, so Ayrshire, in terms of delivering the service. Ayrshire, in terms of a set of values of how they would work with children and young people, very much of the shared values that the council would have. And they also have extensive experience, including the experience working with neighbouring authorities of delivering such a programme. So we first of all looked at whether we would go through existing frameworks with Scotland Excel, but we felt it was much better that we came here and we were very transparent, in terms of what we were doing, in terms of going to a partner provider to provide that for this year and continue to work across the whole system to make sure we can deliver. Because our ambition is not only to deliver for school holiday programmes, our ambition is to deliver for throughout the year in terms of that. So I said, short paper to his members. On the surface, the paper's asking to go to a negotiated contract, but what it really is showing the progress that we're making towards making sure that there is provision, that's inclusive provision, for our young people come this summer, and the recommendations are in paragraph 2.
Thanks, Eddie. It's a good paper for us. Short paper as you described, but I know there's a lot of effort went from yourself and Kevin and the rest of the team into this to resolve, which is an issue that was a problem to us. And I'd like to thank all the members, and I think most of the 32 members get themselves involved with this. And I think, hopefully we get some solutions here working with Ayrshire. Colleagues, any comments? Maureen.
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you, Chief Executive. And it is just to welcome this paper and coming forward. I listened intently to what you have to say. I know that one of the significant issues that has already been raised by parents and criticisms from last year was that they didn't know enough in advance about what was actually going to be available and therefore able to make their plans accordingly. So again, I hope that what we've got is we've got something by bringing this forward to Cabinet today that gives them enough time warning on actually planning. Equally, I remember when we were considering this and listening to the views of parents, the concerns were in terms of what they had access to in previous years. In comparison to last year was actually the number of hours that were available. Now, clearly, this is a paper which needs to move us forward today, but clearly that's something also that I'm looking for some further reassurance about that as well. I also noticed that there's no financial information in this other than the total costs will actually be picked up within existing budgets, which again, that's satisfactory. But again, it's for us to get some mechanism of reporting back to us going forward what those total costs have actually been. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Eddie?
Thanks, Leader. Councillor Mackay, a couple of assurances that we can give there. As members will recall, there was a specific one-off funding set aside in this year's 23-24 budget when the budget was set of transparently £250,000. That's not only for this contract, it's for the totality. So, for instance, facilities and property management will have some costs in terms of this as well, in terms of opening up establishments, etc., over the summer period. But the budget's there, and it will certainly be something that we are very transparent in terms of entering into a negotiated contract about what the value of that contract, etc., is for that. And then, yes, again, making sure that there is more time, available for people. And it was a complex, feedback we got, because there were some folk, it was also about, they had a very positive experience of using direct payments, and other people didn't have that positive experience. So although the direct payment was available to them, they weren't able to identify support to actually spend the money on. And that became, so there was a complex, feedback that we had there. And all of that is why I think it's important that we take this into account right across the council, because some of the employees, the current employees, are actually some of our term time classroom assistants that are normally employed by education. Direct payments obviously normally comes under, our social work, service. And then the wider provision, the inclusive provision, is organised by, vibrant communities on the whole out there as well. So this is a whole council thing, and we have to make sure that the opportunities are there for everyone. So the couple of things you've asked for is, yes, totally transparent around the funding, and particularly if we need recurring funding going forward, we'll be back, to members, in autumn of this year to actually speak about that. And secondly, about we have that ambition to make sure that our young people get, more support than they managed to get last year is definitely the intention here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Maureen. And, as you said, there's opportunities right throughout the year to review how we deliver things. Anyone else? Elaine?
Well, thank you, Chair. I think the time this report is very good because it gives us the opportunity to pause and reflect on where we were last year and the journey that we've been on. Myself and the Provost met with a parental representation last week and had a very good conversation with Kevin Yales yesterday about this paper. So I'm very comfortable in the proposal that's here in front of us today, and I do think it's vital that we move at pace with this, because I agree with Councillor Mackay. One of the things last year was we only found out about the issues very late in the day, so we certainly want to get this up and running as quickly as possible. I was going to ask about the longer term ownership of the process and also the findings from the Lions report that we got the briefing on last year, which obviously is over and above this summer provision on today's report. So I realise you mentioned it's been delegated to the Children and Young People's group. So my assumption is we will get another report from them to pick up the other elements that were raised through the engagement with the parents. And also with this report, point 5, obviously we'll be able to use this exercise with Aberlour as a sort of baseline activity, and how we would then capture the formal learnings from this year to build on in future programmes. So I'm assuming that we would get further reports at the appropriate time for them, including the finances as well.
Yeah, I think we should be monitoring it pretty closely, just as Ed outlined, and just financial transparency is what we're about. But I think learning, and it is that wee bit more difficult because this has covered quite a number of services and not just vibrant communities, education, everything. And it's I think we do need a report back of some kind, Eddie.
So again, members will recall when the council moved to this structure a number of years ago, and children's services wasn't clearly located with any one department. That was the reason the Children and Young People Strategic Group was established. So there was a place that would actually take ownership, of the wider issues around children's services. That's a group that's co-chaired by Marion and by Linda McCauley-Griffiths. So it's a co-chair of that group. I think it's something we need to look at and make sure that we're seeing that focus of children being reported back. It normally reports directly to Community Planning Partnership, but there's no reason we can't get a report directly to here. And I'm happy for us to take additional recommendation, here that we see a report back, to Cabinet in terms of the future, wider ASM provision, including the recommendations from the Alliance report. That's because the Alliance report is published, it's in the public domain, so bring that back about the actions that we can take forward for there. And that would be an action that we would allocate to the Children and Young People Strategic Group.
Yes, I think I'd be comfortable with that, just to add that additional recommendation. Yeah, that would be useful in terms of the wider ASM provision and some of the feedback we're getting from Alliance. Anyone else? Okay, if we add that additional recommendation to paragraph 2 in terms of a further report, can we agree recommendations? Okay, now going to item 4E, which is the Property Management Plan Progress Report. Andrew Kennedy. You're always hiding, Andrew. I never know where you are about the...
And I move about a wee bit as well sometimes. Thanks, Chair. This report is part of the wider asset management framework and is one of a suite of more detailed reports focused on individual asset types. This report focuses on our operational buildings and assesses via matrix the condition, suitability, utilisation, as well as energy use, running costs, accessibility. The framework was developed in 2019, bringing together key property asset types the council services use, including the leisure trust facilities as well. The budgets for maintenance and management of these buildings are allocated via a central repair account and a capital component renewal budget, as well as obviously significant investment through our larger capital projects to replace and refurbish these buildings. The matrix results are shown in Table 1, which is an overall reduction in the number of buildings and a reduction in the number of red buildings over the last year. We continue to develop the detail of the matrix and a further review will be undertaken to continue to ensure our priority investment is focused on the right places. And there's a wee section in the report just at paragraph 15, just to kind of focus a number of areas around those sort of 5 key headings, recognising the importance and the shift around some of these areas as we've developed the matrix and analysed the information. Appendix 1 identifies all the red and amber buildings and sets out the actions already planned or being progressed or where current assets and assessments remains suitable. Table 2 in the main report highlights a number of locations where priority actions Cabinet are being asked to agree. This includes some component renewal investment, retaining and maintaining the buildings, reviewing with services or declaring surplus, which will include marketing or demolition. As I've said, this report is part of the wider asset management framework and links to our wider capital investment. As members will recall from the budget and capital reports in February, we continue to have a further £500 million capital investment programme. And as well as assessing the buildings, this report helps prioritise the spend to ensuring our buildings are fit for purpose, particularly areas where we're not spending significant capital money. Then the priorities around this report starts to kind of spread the rest of the budget across other areas. So we've allocated £2 million of that overall component renewal each year for the next 5 years, and that component renewal will partially cover what we actually need to spend. There's a significant demand in terms of areas of improvement. We have prioritised and undertaken risk assessments around all of those spends. A number of life cycle and component elements will maybe get a few more years out of things. So clearly there's still a need to look at that spend, but it may not be immediate spend. And there's other areas where clearly we're prioritising we need to take action this year. All the requirements are assessed on those identified priorities, risk priorities, and paragraph 20 indicates the kind of priority areas that we obviously need to focus that spend on. We recognise that a number of further issues have been feeding into our needs assessment and will continue to influence our investment. Climate change remains a major challenge over the coming years, and the need to ensure our heating, insulation, low energy lighting, etc. are all part of the focus and improvements in terms of our component spend. And Cabinet have identified an additional amount of money within the capital programme to try and kind of assist with those areas. The property pledge has also strengthened the relationship with building users and engages users in promoting the value and importance of our facilities. And this has really strengthened that engagement through the central team managing our property maintenance and the users of our building and getting a real understanding of that relationship and importance. And it has allowed us to prioritise funding at a more local level to improvements within each of the buildings. I think the other point that's noted in there is obviously the development of the award scheme, and that's really engaged particularly our schools and really taking action day to day to minimise any additional costs or wasted spend within our buildings. The report also notes the requirements around synthetic pitches and the increasing costs as well as the replacement requirements over the coming years. Pitches offer a significantly improved community facility and offer for our young people in our schools, but recognise the need to retain these facilities. The report is noting the future requirement beyond existing maintenance and component budgets, and obviously a recommendation that we would look for the repair and renewal fund in future years to be utilised to address that need as it arises. As everyone will recognise, COVID and the cost of living has had a major impact on how the council works, and a number of strategies and approaches pre-COVID are required to be reconsidered, and our office accommodation remains an area where new ways of working need to be reflected. We will continue to develop our approach based on service needs and reflecting our approach in how we work to maximise the best use of our buildings. And clearly there's a number of buildings noted within the report where utilisation is a key factor in the assessment and the buildings coming out as amber. The final area in the report includes the consideration of a number of vacant and surplus buildings in Table 5. This brings together a number of facilities where service changes and previous reviews have brought us to a position where updates and decisions are being asked to be progressed. Moving forward, I'm keen to establish further clarity in reporting on these facilities and additional costs are increasing and the impact on the community with delays and challenges with some of these buildings really does cause some considerable concerns. The actions noted for recommendations in Table 5, again, are asking for agreement to review and invest for future use, engage with external partners and market to identify alternative uses, and where following ongoing reviews there is no identified use, agree recommendations to demolish. I recognise this report. I recognise the report actions will continue to deliver improvement across our property estate, but noting with the current challenging financial position, ensuring our property spend aligns with our priorities and community need is essential. It is not an agenda we can progress on our own, and continued engagement with building users, partners, communities and businesses is central to our approach. I hope members will agree the report provides a rational and considered plan for delivering this. I'd refer members to the recommendations and recognise there's a lot of detail in the report, so happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Quite a comprehensive and full report. There's a lot in this. There's some big decisions in here. you know, and it's, I think it's something we need to address, and I think your thanks, Andrew, to a lot of work certainly went into this. I know that colleagues have been at your door just asking questions about this, but a lot in here. But I'll kick off, I'll open it up, take any kind of questions. Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if it's worth doing some kind of summary report for the Kilmarnock Strategic Town Centre group for the non-elected members on that group, so the community representatives have the same level of information, even if it's just pulling out the headlines for the Kilmarnock properties. I have to admit, some of the heritage properties that we have, for example, Civic North, Civic South, makes me a bit nervous when we're talking about marketing them as surplus to requirement. I'm sure we'll do any due diligence, and I know that will be an interesting exercise for the information we might get back from that, but we obviously don't want a repeat where we've had historical examples of important buildings ending up in the wrong hands. So we get landlords who don't look after them the way that we want them to look after it. But we've got that experience to build on, so I'm sure the due diligence will be there if we ever get into that sort of territory. But I think the information of the audit and what the buildings are getting looked at, and even just what the council owns, may be helpful to other members of that group out with the sort of council officers and elected members.
And I think maybe that's worthwhile adding to the recommendations. I mean, you mentioned Kilmarnock, there might be other community groups that want to do the same, but certainly, you know, Civic Centre North and Civic Centre South, huge historic importance for the town and for the whole of East Ayrshire, in fact. You know, we are where we are with them, and you know, I think we'd want to give any kind of assurances that the buildings are protected. We have in the past, and even in recent past, had issues where we've disposed of buildings and people have really not acted the way, you know, they would intended, you know, and given sort of kind of commercial reasons, have kind of banked the property, for want of a better word. But we want, you know, to have some assurances about some of these really important buildings, and I think it's a good suggestion for some of the Kilmarnock Town Centre buildings that we refer it to that group for their consideration as well, or for note for their information and some reassurance around it. But there might be some other buildings in other communities as well that falls into that category, and I think we'd be open to that as well. Andrew, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly there has been previous examples where buildings, and there's a number of them across a whole range of communities and across the country, that are left and there is no use for them. And I think this is the key to our approach in terms of our marketing. It's not about selling a property, it's about identifying a new use. And I think that's really what we need to be considering here with our approach to marketing. There is no requirement for us to take any offer. And I think, but what I'm really keen that we do is test the market. We're seeing some more approaches informally and interest in some of these buildings. And I think this will give us that kind of formal starting point to allow us to maybe develop options that we're able to bring back, that actually bring new life into our buildings, rather than, as I say, leaving them and handing them over to someone else.
No, that's good. That's quite reassuring, Andrew. Elaine?
Yeah, if I can just quickly come back on that, that all makes perfect sense to me, but I think it's that sort of level of dialogue that we want to be having with the community. So it's not just within council chambers with elected members, that we're widening out that discussion and raising the public awareness. Because a lot of time people, they'll look at an empty derelict building in their town and they'll say, what's the council doing about that? And sometimes it's not even within council ownership. So it's that whole getting that proper dialogue and getting into the, you know, the deep dives of what the possibilities actually are out there for a lot of the community buildings that aren't getting used at the moment. So yeah, no, I think that's definitely the direction of travel that we should be looking at.
No, I would agree 100%, Elaine. Absolutely, but I think we've got to put it out there, because I think for the whole East Ayrshire, these buildings, even when they're lying empty, are draining resources. Their cost is, but we want to actually, we're custodians of these buildings, and we want to act responsibly and find a good use for them, and where appropriate, work up a project as we have in the past with other folk where we can, and use the resources from our volunteers and our community groups that are out there. Claire, then I've got Maureen. Claire.
Just moving on from what Elaine was saying, it's our towns have plenty of empty buildings like the banks. The banks have left us with empty buildings, and it's unfortunate there was nothing ever put in place by the banks, to help sustain or market these buildings. And again, it's the council that gets looked at to kind of sort them out. But I'm really impressed with the report, Andrew. I think it's fantastic. But I mean, the one thing that we've learned is that all buildings have to have a sustainable use. It has to have a change of use. It has to be sustainable. And I think the present crisis has forced us to concentrate on that. So thank you.
Very much, Claire. Maureen. You there, Maureen?
Apologies. Yes, indeed I am. Sorry. I am looking at this with real interest, but I think we need to be absolutely clear here about where the responsibility and who it is that actually takes any decisions. I think that's absolutely vital. And I think sometimes in the past, almost some of our enthusiasm to ensure that we do include as wide an area as possible has led us into some difficulties with just lack of absolute clarity as to who has responsibility to take decisions and who is accountable for those decisions. Particularly when we look at Civic North and Civic South and London Road, there is nothing there which is letting us see a sense of where we have reached decisions or where there were alternatives. Now, I know that these are things that will have been considered. So there are huge spaces between what's in a column which identifies for us what the issues are, to then another column which tells us what the recommendations are. And I wonder if what we have got in some of those issues here is that we have actually got quite a big gap, that actually it would have been very helpful in this paper if we had had some more of the background work that I am sure that will have been done. So, for example, I mean in terms of Civic North, what would it take if we were to do an upgrade on that building? What would the uptake, the improvement costs of Civic Centre South be? How would that compare in relation to London Road? How would that compare in relation to what we think the marketability and what the asset value therefore for us as an authority are of those sites? So I think that's something that's really important. Just on that alone, Andrew, I wonder if I could stop there and you could have the opportunity to come back to a response on that, please.
Thanks, Maureen. Maybe I'll bring in Eddie first, just on the kind of London Road, Civic North, Civic South. I know where you're referencing, Maureen, so maybe it'd be useful to bring in Eddie at those particular buildings.
So the bit I'll come in about is, Councillor Mackay, you spoke about where decisions are made and how they're made, and then Andrew will do, the bit about the actual buildings. So Katie and Andrew put in a very, structured model of that. So there is an overall strategic group in terms of capital, that Ayrshire that people bring in, we're all present at, Joe, etc., present in terms of the discussions. but you're absolutely right, you know, so there is detailed discussions, and Simon produces extensive papers for us, you know, in terms of that, for us to be able to consider and go through. And yes, in this paper, you know, we've kind of went from, you know, that column, kind of third column along to the fourth column, you know, in terms of issues to recommendations. But again, you would be right in saying there has been discussion behind that. But also some of the particular issues you raised there about decisions that would need to be made, you know, by yourselves as council, by yourselves as elected members, on the scale of some of the decisions there about, you know, what we use this building for, as opposed to what the opportunities to develop, you know, like the buildings over at Civic North and South. You know, and I know when there were some of them, and, you know, Andrew can speak about this in a minute, some of our concern at times, and this is concern we should openly share with yourselves, is, you know, how would it look at a time like this if we looked at developing Civic North and South as office accommodation for the council for many millions of pounds, you know, like when actually, you know, we're tight in terms of the capital programme and what we can do. And there's some of the discussions, you know, that we would have, but it's how we share the discussions and actually get feedback for yourselves and guidance for yourself actually is the way forward. I think that's important for us to hear. Andrew, do you want to expand?
Yeah, maybe just sort of to kind of, I suppose, partly repeat what I've already said about the options in terms of marketing. Is very much to find those alternative uses and get some interest from external organisations that are willing to come and work with us in partnership around these buildings. I think, as I said, I would hope to give that assurance that we wouldn't look just to sell the building to get rid of an asset. So I think that's very clear, the approach, and I suppose the bit for me is separating out our office accommodation from the buildings that we have, which are surplus. There is no doubt we've changed completely how people are operating from COVID, but it very much aligned with our smarter working principles that were set prior to COVID. That effectively has reduced our need for office accommodation. And when you look at what we've got in the town centre in terms of Opera House, in terms of Johnny Walker Bond, and a number of other facilities that are there, the need for office space is reducing. And clearly, Civic North and South are ones where we'd already started that process of vacating and moving people into other facilities. Clearly, the options along the London Road as well, I mean, we need to look at how best we use this facility as well, and that's part of what's already in the report and discussed in terms of the smarter working approach, and we'll absolutely be coming back to Cabinet in terms of those proposals and the work that we're looking at across our whole estate. But I think the key bit for me is that separation between office use and actually what the alternative uses are for our buildings. And that's clearly what we're trying to do here is really just maximise that interest and see who else is willing to come and work with these buildings. They are town centre buildings. They are elements of a listed status, so there is limits to what can be done with them, and we'd obviously look to work within that to find a solution.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Andrew. I would hopefully, particularly with those buildings, I would be hopeful before anything, you know, particularly Civic Centre North and South. These are big decisions for us. There are big decisions elsewhere in here for us as well, and I think it would be quite useful to take that to the town centre steering group for you know, for them to have a discussion and what their views are as well. And I think that's certainly something we can add to the recommendations. I don't know, Maureen, do you want back on it?
Yeah, I do, because I hear what's being said, but I suppose, you know, we've looked at Civic historically. We've always viewed Civic Centre North, South and London Road as really all being office space for us. Yes, having elements across all three as being customer offering options where, you know, members of the public are actually able to use services within those buildings to undertake some transactions, just as a for example. So I'm, again, I'm a bit surprised that in a sense we're not looking at these 3 areas as a total. Now, some of that goes back to we have had a policy in the past where it has very much been that we had an emphasis on making sure that we had high visibility within the town centre of Kilmarnock, and part of that was about actually maximising the number of staff that we had, to look at what the opportunities were that having that number of staff physically based within the town centre meant in relation to businesses within the town centre. So I suppose for me, I have that sense of, we have that as a total. So if we are then looking at a change of that policy, then, that's something that I would like to see vocalised with some of the arguments and some of the background thinking actually behind that. So I know that I'm focusing very much on Kilmarnock in relation to this discussion. I want us to have the opportunity and to have officers having the opportunity to come back, but please, there are other elements that I want to pick up on as well in relation to the paper. Leader, if you can give me the opportunity to come back with those too, please.
Absolutely. I think in terms of, Eddie's alluded to, the kind of, obviously there's been sort of kind of consideration of the possible uses of Civic North, Civic South, but to retrofit either or both facilities. Bear in mind, we've got Johnny Walker Bond and the Opera House in the town, but to retrofit those, today's prices would certainly get into tens of millions, and I'll take professionals a steer on that, but and spending that kind of money that we don't have, in a limited budget, is maybe why it's been ruled out. But I think it needs to be a deal have that conversation, and maybe to put that out there without too much work, on it, because in terms of the ballpark figure that would I think the public seeing is spending that kind of money. I know that's happened in other local authorities recently, but I think we need to put that figure out there, but without involving too much scoping, because there is the impact it would have on parking and other issues within the town centre. So it's maybe it could be part of the exercise of putting it out to the town centre steering group as to what possible look at that. I don't know. Any suggestions?
There's already a piece of work that Andrew's doing in terms of the wider office accommodation strategy, and clearly, you would start for that. You would start from what is the need of the council to actually do it, and then go to the buildings, after that, and work our way through that in terms of it. And at that stage, there are a whole range of options are open for us there. But the piece of work in terms of what the office accommodation strategies is already there, and it's established in terms of a piece of work for us to do. Andrew, what's the kind of next reporting at stages along when we talk about office accommodation strategy?
I think certainly, recognising that a lot of the kind of planning and the thought process was pre-COVID, and obviously I'm happy to bring a further report just to kind of give a wee bit of that background. Recognising that the office strategy, and we've been working in office strategy for probably 15 years across the council, and that has resulted in a reduction in a number of buildings, rationalisation and investment in new buildings, including the Opera House and Johnny Walker Bond within the town centre. I think the challenge we're facing at the moment is effectively the capacity of Opera House and Johnny Walker Bond that are actually both in good condition and are within the higher scoring buildings across our estate, can accommodate the needs of the council going forward in terms of desk space and amount of space from an office perspective. I think we also have the Torbets unit which is at the moment, as noted in the report as well, that we still need to develop the use for that. And clearly that kind of customer-facing element that Councillor Mackay mentioned was the focus of what that would be as well. So that would still retain that service within the town centre. I think clearly it goes beyond just the council buildings within the town centre. Education staff have incorporated into schools. We've got more staff based up at Western Road, linked to the operational services that are based there. And obviously we've got, again, Burnside Street, Greenholme Street as well, which well, Burnside Street and Greenholme Street are buildings which, again, the housing service are utilising within that wider strategy of the overall office accommodation, and again looking at how those spaces could be better utilised for services as well. So as I say, the office accommodation strategy has been continuing for a number of years, and we have reduced the number of buildings. And again, I think, as I've noted in the report, we do need to have that further refresh following what we've seen through COVID, and actually what our current needs are, which from desk space is significantly lower than it was pre-COVID.
Notwithstanding all that, though, Andrew, I think we need to actually spell it out in terms of, because people wonder, you know, in terms of our town, our town centre first policy, why, any capital receipt that we would get for London Road would be nowhere near how much it would be to replicate what we have here in either Civic North or Civic South, or both. I think we need to spell that out. What that would cost. I think it'd be significantly millions more. And I think Eddie alluded to, I don't think the public would be looking for us to create another headquarters with adequate parking and all the rest and all the other pressures that we want to find that within the town centre. And I think that the price tag of doing that, I think, we've ruled it out, but I think we should be saying why we're ruling it out. So, in terms of rough estimation, how much you think it would cost to have some kind of, to replicate what we have here and in the town centre? And could you, in terms of parking and all the other issues that are there? I think we need to spell that out.
I think in terms of, we have done a number of assessments of Civic Centre North and South, in particular Civic North, in terms of its accommodation and the scale of the building. And I think we're certainly looking at probably between 10 and 15 million pounds to actually address all of the issues that are within that building. We do have issues at the moment in terms of its current heating system, but also in terms of accessibility, and actually what the current condition is not a great condition. So again, having staff working in there, again, is not ideal. So it would take significant investment to bring it up to the standard of accommodation we've got in other buildings. In terms of marketing, again, the challenge, I think, comes down to the different sites, but it is unlikely that I think we would get much more than maybe £1 million for selling this site. But again, that's down to what the potential use would be for the site. And again, there's obviously challenges there as well in terms of using the existing building or other future uses. So I think you're right, there is a significant cost for moving services. And Civic North and South is where the challenge is in terms of investment, and clearly that's the ask here, is that we go out and look to see if we can get that investment from elsewhere.
Okay, thanks Andrew. Jim first, then I'll get Maureen back in.
Thanks, Dougie. If I can take the focus away from Kilmarnock for a wee while and understand the importance of everything that's been said about the town centre, if I can focus a wee bit on Kilmarnock and Auckland Light with Andrew Way. So for me, I've got 2 or 3. First of all, how do we utilise Rossa House and get more people into Rossa House? That's, I know it says it in there, but what kind of measures are we taking to go with that? I think for me, Auckland Light Academy and the leisure centre were dependent on the review of the East Ayrshire Leisure and their facilities, kind of time scale for that. Green Mill, I know we're going to market that as well, but and I'll look at the marketing kind of time frame for that, and how long we're going to market it for. And obviously that if it didn't sell within that, when would we move to demolition for that? I don't want a vandalised site sitting in the middle of Connacht town centre. And I had one more, I think, was the old RBS building in Connacht. I know we've spent a considerable amount of money already on that, round about the roof, but we know that it still needs a wee bit more investment inside before I think we could go to market it for anybody that could use it at all, or would we leave it as is and just market as is?
I suppose both in terms of Green Mill and the RBS building, in terms of that option to market, would be to market as is in the first instance to see what interest we would get, because obviously we wouldn't be keen to necessarily put additional money into it. And again, if it may come to that point where you would be then in a negotiated situation in terms of what else we would do to it to allow for a sale. In terms of Green Mill, it is in the conservation area, so we will have to do the marketing as is first. Again, we would want to keep that to a reasonable timescale over the next couple of months to kind of get us to the point where we could look at a demolition if that was the case. Because again, as you say, the risks around that, and we're already seeing some damage over the last couple of weeks there. So we would want to kind of progress that as quickly as possible. However, we will need to go through the proper process just to ensure that we're able to take that decision when we can. As I say, in terms of planning requirements, etc., we would need to take advice on those areas. In terms of Auchinleck, I would hope that report is potentially back to Cabinet before recess. I think that was it.
Thanks for that, Andrew. I think it's important to note about the old RBS building that the spend on that, I think, was essential for the preservation of that building at that particular time as well. And the expectations that we were going to have occupants in there, I think, have now, for obviously due to COVID and the way COVID's impact on the way we work, have kind of fell through as well. So I think that'd be the main reason that we're going to market.
Yes, Maureen.
Thank you very much. And could I just say that I agree with every comment, and you know it was on my list. The comments that Councillor McMahon, Deputy Leader, has actually made. I agree with everything that's been said there in relation to those buildings and the way that we're operating. I'm sorry, I'm still going back to talk about Kilmarnock Town Centre, because I think that there is something very specific and very particular about just how we're looking at that. And whilst I don't want to in any way detract from the fact that we have a newly formed strategic group and the importance of the work that's there to do, I still want to be absolutely clear in terms of when we are making these hugely significant decisions, it's where does responsibility for taking those decisions actually lie? And my point is really that is with Cabinet, that is with Council ultimately, not anywhere else. And I do think that Andrew's offer for another paper, which looks overall at Civic North Centre, Civic South Centre and London Road, is something that it would be absolutely appropriate for us to have, for us to consider as a very specific paper with some very clear recommendations as to what we have in relation to that aspect of our overall portfolio. Again, I do want to make some comments further.
Maureen, just to be helpful, I'll maybe just, I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of the office management strategy, that you know, Andrew will be bringing back a report fairly soon on that. And I think any decision, you know, we might reference this to the steering group, but any final decision comes back here to the Cabinet for a final decision, just to give you that wee bit of reassurance, if that's okay. And you can come on to, if you're happy with that, you can go into some
Well,
other areas?
I think I do feel that that's a specific recommendation to specifically look at the council's property within sort of Kilmarnock town centre and include London Road in that as something additional. But I'll come back to that. Again, I want to just raise some points that have been raised through group. And that is just again, Andrew, it's for clarity. For instance, at Appendix 1, we've got Muirkirk Primary School in, and its status is amber. Now, that was, of course, some surprise was expressed in relation to that. I understand that refers back to paragraph 15 in terms of condition, usability, energy, risk and costs. And it's not a comment on the fact that there are some problems with the actual condition of Muirkirk Primary School, but I just want that actually highlighted, and there are some other illustrations of that in the paper. Equally, again, at Appendix 1, there is quite a considerable section there, which is looking at our cemetery sites. And again, when we have done some background work on this, we know that our overall strategic cemetery review was last done, I think it was 2015, that I've had sight of that paper, and thank officers for that opportunity. Cemeteries, as we know, are real places of sanctuary, real places of significance in the lives of our communities. So again, the fact that we haven't done the update on that we have got some significant numbers of cemeteries which are listed at red and amber, and again, referring back to the 2015 report, at that point, now that's a considerable length of time ago, and at that point there were several cemeteries which were highlighted that it was expected that the available space within them would only have a 7-year lifespan. At that stage in 2015, we are now considerably past that. So again, I have had indication that that's due for review. The question is, what's the time scale? How are we going to look in terms of forward planning to make sure that that's reviewed appropriately? And again, asking the question in terms of what is the investment that we're putting into that in terms of the significance of those areas to our communities? And have we achieved any awards in terms of status of gold, silver, bronze, which I understand is the status rating in relation to cemeteries? So just a couple of additional points to raise. But again, I do want to highlight already that everything that Councillor McMahon has certainly said, I welcome and support.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose just in terms of Muirkirk, you're right. It's the overall assessment that is coming out as amber. There are high ambers and there are low ambers as well, and that's one of the things that we're looking to consider in terms of the review of the matrix, because clearly stuff that's at high amber is still more than suitable for our requirements and meets all of our needs. There may be elements of it in terms of energy efficiency or utilisation, which then drops it down from green. So I think the review that we're looking at, and we continually review this matrix, just to kind of make sure that the logic is actually coming through. And as I say, I think that was one of the things we were looking at, is whether we split the amber scoring, because it's quite a wide range, just to focus on the ones where we know we absolutely need to do work, and there's other ones that we can manage through normal maintenance, etc. So I think that is something that is reflected through different building types. I think probably from the cemeteries point of view that there's a couple of elements in this. And I think the first part is this report refers to the buildings within the cemeteries, not the overall cemeteries. So that's the reason why we've noted in the actions that we will incorporate the buildings into the wider assessment of the overall requirements. One of the key things there as well, though, is in terms of the assessment and the matrix that we're doing here, what we are trying to do is align the overall matrix that incorporates schools or corporate office, large historic leisure buildings with small bothies and storerooms and other things that we've got within the building. So I think some of the elements in there that we're flagging as red, which effectively is raising some concerns, operationally is still meeting some of the needs of the service. So I think there's a wee bit there about that review and just saying, are we okay with it being at that level as well, in terms of how the assessment from the score is considered in conjunction with the services. In terms of the other aspect around the cemeteries report, the report in 2015, and I think in particular Dalrymple and Auchinleck were highlighted as sites where there needed to be additional demand. At that time, there was also investment agreed, and there was extensions put onto those cemeteries. We also allocated about £1 million in terms of refurbishment. And that was about 5-6 years ago. We identified that. That was again focused on some of the improvements across each of the priority sites, and that included some significant spend in retaining walls, paths, and things like that as well. There is still some of that fund left within the capital programme. We also allocated a further 400,000 as part of the green infrastructure investment plan linked to our climate change action plan, and both those things will come together as part of the updated green infrastructure plan. And again, when I said at the beginning, this is one report as part of a suite of reports from the asset management framework, then that green infrastructure update report is scheduled to come back at some point this year, and hopefully that will be able to kind of address some of the other areas. I'm not sure if there's any other colleagues in terms of the status of cemeteries. I don't have that answer, and whether we can come back in or Blair can answer that.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I don't actually have the information to hand, Councillor Mackay, but what we'd remit to doing is going away and discussing with the range of officers that's involved in the review of cemeteries, and what you'll see is I'll commit to getting it on the Cabinet tracker at the most appropriate date, but I can't commit to a date at this moment in time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Blair. Graham.
Thanks. Just to got earlier comments for Councillor Mackay, the focus on the Kilmarnock Town Centre. I think I'm quite comfortable with the fact that recommendation 2 will highlight any issues in the new scoring matrix. I mean, look, with 2030 coming up, where to meet our net zero target, I think the Enerfit costs to meet these standards up will be significant.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've only been a councillor for 11 months now, and when I walk about London Road, I can see the setup in here. It's clearly pre-COVID. I don't think we're making the best use of our office space, and I'm quite happy. I'm sure I'm quite happy to share an office space with my colleague here, Neil, or any others. And I think we need to work smarter and make better use, especially with the energy costs now. We need to make better use of our office space and make sure we're targeting the right buildings to make sure we meet our net zero targets.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Graham. It's the energy costs and changing working habits are total game changers. Elena, you offered you're going to share the office here.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely willing, because I agree with some of the comments that Councillor Barton has made. We're not making full use of the office space, but that's an immense challenge for Andrew and his team. And I think we all know our towns and our villages, how people use them have changed over time. And the COVID pandemic accelerated some of the ideas that we're trying to do with flexible workforce. So what Andrew's currently grappling with is the existing state of the whole buildings and estate management hasn't kept pace with those changes. So I think today's report, I know we've spent considerable time on it, but I don't want people to lose sight of it. It's an excellent piece of work that's got us to where we are. And I think all the comments and the length of time that we've discussed the paper today is a reflection on how important elected members see this and that they want to be an active member of the possible and future solutions. So just agreeing with the earlier comments about how we keep this dialogue going, so it's not just individual reports, but obviously if there are reports that are useful to bring out and highlight for specific areas, not just within Kilmarnock, but outside Kilmarnock, then that would definitely be useful going forward. As I said earlier as well, if we can widen that scope to non-council members of the Kilmarnock Strategic Group, because it may not just be for us to have all the answers, there may be people out there. And obviously Andrew's suggestion of going to market as well may flag up some opportunities that we would never consider as well. So excellent report, Andrew, and thank you for getting us to this point, and hopefully we'll continue the dialogue. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Can I maybe bring in Eddie here?
It's just, a comment on our ways of working, like through COVID and post-COVID. And it was one of the huge difficulties for Andrew and Angela in actually looking at, our office accommodation, is I don't think we've settled down yet in terms of what future working practices are going to be. As we know, there was that huge shift from everybody working in the office to almost everybody working at home. Just now, there's some people back in, but I was with our young workforce, the other day, and I was talking to them about how they feel about working from home a lot. So how do they feel? And the ones who are actually working in environments where they're in all the time, like schools or some of the other, places, they get a different experience for people who are working at home a lot and how they actually fit in. So one of the huge challenges for us just now, and it's not one that, I'm saying we don't therefore step up to and address, is what is our future working model going to be? How do we sit down? You'll have heard all over the place, some councils, some other organisations starting to say, everybody has to be in the office 3 days a week. There's no science behind that. It's just somebody's decided it. Instead of actually working with different services about what's the most effective way of delivering that. And in relation to this paper, what I'm reflecting is how hard it is just now for Andrew and Angela to actually, look at what is the future need, for us in terms of offices. And it's just one of the things we're going to have to be open about when we actually develop these papers, coming forward, saying this is the parameters, this is the assumptions that we're making, around this. I mean, in the past, clearly as a council, we've moved forward. We've had the investment in the Opera House. We've had the investment in the Johnny Walker bond that's added huge office capacity for us in the town centre. And now we're sitting with 2 buildings that are vacant in the, almost in the town centre. So things change and things move. And it's in that moving environment that we're asking Andrew and Angela and others to actually bring forward proposals here. So I just reflect, I don't think we've actually settled into a way of working yet.
Thanks, Eddie. I'm just, in terms of adding an additional recommendation, or maybe 2. In terms of Elaine's point about, the steering group, the town centre bills be referred to steering group for consideration and for further discussion. I think we could say that. But maybe also something about the town. It's in there, but maybe to say explicitly that all town centre office accommodation be considered as part, including London Road as well, being considered as part of the office accommodation strategy. Something like that.
And bring a report forward.
And bring a report forward. Is that helpful, Maureen? You're on mute, Maureen.
Apologies, I keep doing this, sorry. If we were to put Civic, North, South and London Road all at the same category, in other words, if we were to put them potentially all out to test the market, because we are making presumptions on what the market response would be, what the value of these assets would be, if we were to market them all, because again, very clearly, it says there is no application to take any offer. And, that then gives us the opportunity to then look overall in terms of all of the information. And I agree with things that are being said in terms of we need to look overall, what's our strategy? We need to future plan, as Chief Executive has said. We need to look at what are the demands of a workforce that are not yet with us actually are going to be. How do we retain the young workforce that we have got in appropriate environments that they would want to be part of going forward long term? So I wonder if there is an opportunity to do that.
Thanks, Maureen. For me, I think, I wouldn't like to create any uncertainty about the future use of this building. I think, a simple report, actually, how you would, retrofit a building to accommodate what's in here at London Road, even taking post-COVID considerations within that, and the energy costs, because there's a lot of work been done to this building. In terms of this chamber alone was £1 million, and that was over, 10 years or so, So, the cost of retrofitting that, creating this again, I wouldn't like to, go down that path. But I take your point, but I think the cost has to be, whether it's Andrew mentioned 10, 15 million pounds, I think it would be way in excess of that. And I don't think the public would thank us for considering that. And I don't think it's worth risking putting any uncertainty about this premises at this stage. But I think, in terms of the office accommodation strategy, I think it needs to be spelled out. And then we need to be transparent about it at the same time. Claire?
Just following on from what Eddie said there about we don't know quite what the workforce is doing just now. I mean, putting it out to market would be very interesting, but we're competing with huge companies' portfolios now that are desperate to get their property rented out, are desperate to get office staff in them, and they're competing with a changing world as well. And that's not just private, that's municipal portfolios as well. There's lots of councils trying to offload property too. So it might be a case it's diluted at the moment, and we wouldn't be getting a true indication of it. I recognise your concerns with London Road, Dougie, but I don't see why North and South couldn't be put out to test the market. Thank you.
And I mean, that could take place as, within the accommodation strategy. When is the report? Is it due before the recess, Andrew?
Happy to bring something back before recess.
Sorry to put the pressure, but
yeah.
Katie.
Yeah, I'm not going to be part of the future of this, but we've got all of this information, and we will happily bring back a paper referencing. We wanted to take some actions here today, and there's been a lot of deliberation, but there's a context, as Councillor Mackay and many others have said. And we are at a time, we've learned from COVID, but remember, pre-COVID, we had a transformation strategy that had an asset part of it, and we were looking to reduce office accommodation then, and we've got a number of decisions around that. So I know that Angela and Andrew have a lot of the information that's required, and we can bring a specific paper back on office accommodation before the recess, maybe before we go further about marketing this place, because I think that you need to see the full picture, and we're happy to go. We've got the information, and we're happy to bring that forward, and I know that both of them would be keen to do that if that would then allow us to make further determination. But this was part of our transformation before COVID, and COVID accelerated the office accommodation we had. If you remember rightly, for those of you that were there, not all of you were, we determined that we had too many council assets, and this is why this framework was set up, to look at the ones that we wanted to keep, the ones that we wanted to invest in, the ones that we could disinvest in. COVID accelerated that because so many people were at home, and Eddie's absolutely right. The situation with the workforce is still settling, as it is right across Britain and across the world in terms of the use. But even with that, we still have a surplus of office accommodation that we had before. And in terms of our investment going forward, we need to make the very best value decisions for the council. But we've got detailed information, and we're more than happy, I'm sure, to bring a paper back in that before the recess to let members see it in its entirety.
Well, I think we just simply put that in the recommendation. Well, that we refer the town centre, Kilmarnock Town Centre properties to the steering group for comment and discussion, and have a comprehensive briefing on the office accommodation for the town centre and elsewhere, and brought back to Cabinet before the recess. Oh, sorry, Ian,
That's right. issue dear to my heart, the communications and how everything in East Ayrshire is fed through London Road. I mean, that is the epicentre of the entire comms for the council. So, I mean, you had mentioned the investment in the chambers, which rightly so, but probably in a much greater scale than that is how would you possibly decouple London Road from its key position in the communication system that we operate?
Okay. Sorry, Maureen.
Sorry, thank you. And, you know, Ian, that's a completely valid point. And again, I think, you know, it is about having all of the arguments here so as that we are absolutely clear where we are, so as that what we're not doing is we are not, even in any way in the public sense, being perceived to be flip-flopping between town centre first, going off that, then taking a different approach. And again, it's about putting all of that in the public domain. And again, you know, there are some of you who know, there are others who I'm sure will know. I'm not going to go away from I didn't support the amount of money that was spent in the chamber that we have at this moment in time. You know, that's a matter of public record. But we are where we are. And yes, I do see in potential for significant investment, further investment in a building that the council needs as we move forward into 21st century. And you know, remember, we are in the knowledge economy now, in the world of AI, and it is moving at pace. So we have the opportunity to have these virtual assistants with us at all times to be able to truly inform and do a lot of the future proofing that certainly some of people like me with older, rustier brains have more difficulty in assimilating all of the facts together, because that is the world that we are trying to envisage as we go forward. So yes, I take these points. I think it was important that we had that discussion today. I think it is important that we have a future paper coming forward where we have the opportunity to look at all of this in more detail. But again, I don't want to minimise acknowledging the work that actually Angela and Andrew will have done in relation to assimilating really difficult stuff together to bring forward this paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. You know, I think it's helpful if we are rolling out some, you know, a specific strategy. You know, I think we've got to give, you know, got to be very transparent about that, and hopefully that through the paper that Andrew will be bringing back before the recess on the office accommodation will do that. So that's not no. So with that, can we just maybe go to recommendations? Oh, sorry, Drew. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Andrew, for this paper. It was really an eye-opener to see just the running costs of these synthetic pitches, especially when Doon Campus has been asked, the community in Dunmelland has been asked to supply the green space in the new Doon Campus. And the plan is to put some of these synthetic pitches in, like tennis courts and another five-a-side football pitch. So that'll be a concern, just the upkeep of these things as we go forward. Another wee thing is on my tours as a locality spokesperson, speak to some of the communities that's got community asset transfers. The feedback for them is they're finding their insurance premiums really high because it's wrote into their lease they must use the council's insurance company. They're wondering if it's a possibility if they could get their own insurance but still have the cover of £5 million to cover the properties and their assets. Could you have a look at that as well, possibly?
Obviously, I think that one, obviously, I need to take advice from others, and obviously we'd need to bring something back. There's obviously a wider arrangement in terms of the leases that have all been signed up to, and obviously there's a number of things there that we also kind of continue to provide statutory inspections for the properties as well. So there's things that we're doing there just to give the council the assurance that ultimately it's the public asset that we're trying to protect, and ensuring that the appropriate insurances and other checks are all in place is obviously the reasons why these things have been put in within the leases, and clearly that's a wee bit more challenging process to change, but certainly happy to come back to you once with advice from other colleagues.
No, that'd be fine. That's what the communities are asking, if you could have a wee look at that, because the premiums are really high. It's thousands and thousands of pounds now again to cover that, but it seems like it get a bit a lower premium, and that would help them out. So see how things go. Thanks for that, Andrew.
I think just in terms of the synthetic pitch costs, and I suppose really that's maybe just reflective of the position we have with all of our assets, and recognising that actually the capital cost is probably about half the whole life cost of any asset that you're putting in. So recognising the life of your asset, and whether that's maintenance costs, insurance costs, and all of these other rates costs, etc., that you need to have to operate a building, is just as important as obviously the initial capital costs. Pitches obviously is a wee bit more challenging because the life of those surfaces is not as long as maybe the rest of the assets that we would look to invest in, and that's obviously why we're highlighting it today.
That's fine, thank you.
Thanks, Claire.
Just on the synthetic pitches, I was looking into this recently to see if there was any new generations coming up that lasted longer, needed less maintenance, etc. And apparently they're in the pipeline, but we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you.
Well, I see the newer generation requires more maintenance. Seems to be. But anyway. Okay, any other comments? Right, just, okay, can we go to recommendations, and just in terms of add a further recommendation in terms of referring some of the Kilmarnock Town Centre properties to the Kilmarnock Town Centre Steering Group, and noting that there'll be a further report on office accommodation coming in before the recess. So, okay. Okay, and now go to the next item. Oh, that's the end of the items. Now allowed to go. Alan, we thank you all for your help once again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks very much. God bless you.
We like the
Bye-bye.
picture of Sorn Church, by the way.
Good one, thanks.
Okay, just give them a couple of minutes just to log off. Okay, we now go to item 5, and that's it. East Ayrshire Tenant Satisfaction Survey, and it's Helen Merriman. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members and colleagues. The purpose of the report is to seek Cabinet approval to commission the East Ayrshire Tenant Satisfaction Survey 2023 and to agree proposals and timescales for both field survey activity and the publication of the Tenant Satisfaction Survey results. Recommendations are noted at paragraph 2. The East Ayrshire Tenant Satisfaction Survey is undertaken to understand tenants' views of the services provided by the housing service and to identify tenant priorities for potential future improvements in service delivery. It is commissioned every 3 years, with the previous survey having taken place late 2020 by Knowledge Partnership, whereby a total of 669 telephone interviews were undertaken across a representative sample of East Ayrshire Council tenants. The methodology was chosen in response to COVID-19 guidelines in place at the time, and future target returns will be a minimum 10% of the tenant base. The results of the satisfaction survey are analysed across each of the 3 housing management areas and are compared with the findings of the previous East Ayrshire tenant satisfaction surveys to produce robust trend information. The Scottish Social Housing Charter sets the standards and outcomes that all social landlords should aim to achieve in performing their housing activities, and was developed in consultation with the Scottish Housing Regulator, tenants, representative bodies, homeless people, other stakeholders and social landlords to ensure that the Charter outcomes describe the results that tenants and other customers expect social landlords to achieve, cover social landlords' housing activities only, and can be monitored, assessed and reported upon by the Scottish Housing Regulator. The Charter has a strong focus on customer satisfaction and replaces the performance standards set out in the guidance that were issued under the Housing Scotland Act 2001 and does not replace any of the legal duties that apply to social landlords, but the outcomes may describe the results social landlords should achieve in meeting their legal duties. The Scottish Housing Regulator requires social landlords carry out customer satisfaction surveys every 3 years as a minimum standard. The next East Ayrshire Tenant Satisfaction Survey is due to be carried out this year, and it is proposed that the next satisfaction survey retains trend information and continues to meet the Scottish Social Housing Charter requirements. In order to meet the Scottish Housing Regulator Charter indicators, the question set will contain the tenant and service user satisfaction indicator requirements and will comply with the Ipsos Mori Scotland Guide, conducting surveys of tenants and service users, which was prepared for the Scottish Housing Regulator. It is proposed to carry out with a quick quote procurement process to include a quality evaluation panel consisting of representatives from East Ayrshire Federation of Tenants and Residents, East Ayrshire Council's procurement service and the customer liaison team to reach a consensus in terms of which proposed contract provider will carry out the tenant satisfaction survey on behalf of the council. The customer liaison officer will liaise with colleagues across services along with the contract provider to include questions applicable to tenants in relation to service improvement activity and the impact of the cost of living crisis. The proposed field survey and publication timescale is set out at paragraph 17. Thereafter, an action plan will be developed to address areas where performance could be improved. All actions identified where performance needs improvement will also be assigned to the relevant service improvement leads to take forward. Within legal and risk implications, as part of the concluded procurement process, the organisation selected will have liability insurance and will follow guidelines in place. The Scottish Housing Regulator requires customer satisfaction surveys are undertaken every 3 years as a minimum standard, and the East Ayrshire Satisfaction Survey is due for completion during 2023. In order to meet the Scottish Housing Regulator Charter indicators, our satisfaction survey question set will contain indicator requirements for tenants and our service users. There are no human resource or equality implications arising from this report. Our tenant satisfaction survey will cost approximately £12,500 and will be met from our existing budgets. The work contributes to the Council's community planning themes of safer communities and wellbeing and supports and promotes the themes contained within the Council's strategic plan. There are no net zero implications arising from the report. And to conclude, the Scottish Housing Regulator requires that customer satisfaction surveys are undertaken every 3 years as a minimum standard. The next East Ayrshire Tenant Satisfaction Survey is due to be carried out this year, and in order to meet the Scottish Housing Regulator Charter indicators, the survey question set will contain indicator requirements for our tenants and service users. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Good report. Any comments or questions for Helen? You're getting off lately, Helen. It's a good report. We look forward to some of the work that's going to be carried out. Thank you very much. And can we go to recommendations, paragraph 2? Can we agree? Thank you. Okay, on to item 6 now, and update on the Town Centre Regeneration Fund and Place-Based Investment Programme. Claire.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, members. It's exactly 12 o'clock, so good morning and good afternoon. This paper provides an update on projects funded through the Town Centre Regeneration Fund, that's the TCRF, and through last year's place-based investment allocation for noting. And thirdly, it sets out how this year's place-based investment allocation, which will be year 3, will be managed for your approval. The background is set out at paragraphs 3 and 4, principally that in terms of the TCRF projects. This is the latest in a series of papers to Cabinet, with the most recent being in March of last year, and in relation to the place-based investment programme that Cabinet approved relevant matters most recently last August. Paragraphs 5 and Appendix 1 set out the position regarding conclusion of the final 6 TCRF projects. Of these, 4 have achieved full spend and are complete, and 2 are projecting full spend by summer of this year. Paragraphs 6 to 11 and Appendix 2 provide the detail for place-based investment year 2. And I would ask members to note at paragraph 7 that 4 of these projects are, even at this early stage, already complete. And at paragraph 8, note that all projects had contracts in place for works at the end of last month. This satisfies the national grant requirements and will be reported to Scottish Government this month, as in previous years. Through the collaborative approach established last year to have a holistic view of support to applicant projects, we're starting to see some early benefits, as set out at the bullets at paragraph 10. For example, a number of successes for projects in terms of obtaining funds from the Health and Social Care Partnerships Wellbeing PB programme. Progress and learning will continue to be brought forward in future reports as this cross-service work continues. Paragraphs 12 to 20 set out the approach for place-based investment year 3, and can I firstly thank members for the opportunity to engage with you, to share this the learning in this in advance of coming to Chambers this morning, and for the oversight and challenge that was provided through these discussions. This year, our allocation, as set out at paragraph 12, is £792,000, down from 1.13 million last year. And we continue to learn systematically for improvement from our experience of managing the programme and indeed from the community-based groups who deliver these projects. A number of key learnings and improvement actions are set out within paragraphs 13 to 16. For example, we are undertaking a piece of work this year to simultaneously build community wealth within the programme and reduce the challenges faced by community-based groups in terms of obtaining contractors, by forging connections between groups and local trades. And we've developed significantly closer joint working arrangements between community-led regeneration and Vibrant Communities community investment team to strengthen the way that we enable groups to achieve the cocktail of funding that they require. The associated timeline for year 3 is set out at paragraph 16. To highlight for members within this that we're currently within the application period with webinars and face-to-face information sessions ongoing, and that the intention is to bring recommendations for investment to Cabinet in advance of summer recess. Again, based on our learning that this will give successful groups the best chance of success in terms of their delivery and contracts. When I brought place-based investment to Chamber last year, Cabinet approved an improvement aim to have community representation within future decision making. And I'd highlight for members the arrangement for a community assessment panel at paragraph 17. Significantly, members, this is a reflection of the positive way East Ayrshire is delivering on the place principle. 5 local citizens who have acquired the skills and knowledge by themselves delivering projects now feel empowered to take an active role in shaping the way resources are used and to collaborate for all the good of all our towns and villages. Lastly, members, the basis for this year's assessment by senior officers is set out at paragraph 18 to achieve our strategic intent of targeting investment at new and delivery-ready projects, to strengthen alignment with local plans and to leverage wider investment into the local area. The implications are described through paragraphs 21 to 29, setting out the contribution of this work to local strategic priorities, confirming reporting arrangements to Scottish Government, and articulating the risk to community-led regeneration that would exist should monies require to be returned to Scottish Government, and which we are mitigating as I've set out in the report. Members, this paper sets the direction to invest a further £792,000 in our towns and villages, and to put that investment in community hands. The recommendations are at paragraph 2, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks very much, Claire. I should maybe at the start of the item, although it's a previously agreed item, I declared in terms of centre stage my interest there as a board member, but an advisory board. Just to note that, Christine, if you don't mind. Okay, just so many projects, great amount of work, and as you said, a lot of the money has been spent already, and there's a lot of work done, so we're glad to see that. Colleagues, any questions? Maureen?
Thanks very much, and thank you, Claire, and thank you for the opportunity to have had sight of some of the background thinking behind this paper, and I'm glad that you welcome the challenge. It's always good to get a diversity of different views and different experiences. I'm particularly pleased that you have got your board of 5 people, and I will be very interested to see how that actually impacts on the scoring system, and also what they look to come forward with as their additional identified criteria. So that will certainly be interesting when that comes forward. I do want to just do a wee plug for you. I said last year, very happy to support what came forward, noting that there were no Ward 2 projects. Thank you. I do see in the paper that did get looked at in terms of support for projects that didn't secure funding, and acknowledge that there were some within Ward 2 just for completeness. Couple of just additional questions looking at the year 2 funding and what we have sort of coming forward. Some concerns raised about just work in relation to short lease, in terms of it's there marked as in progress, but just concern being expressed about just how long that's taking forward, the time for that to come forward through. Equally, I know that there have been personnel changes within recovery enterprises. It's a small amount of money, but just some security that is still something that's anticipated to be a full spend. Equally, to note the further refurbishment of another counselling space within the Railway Heritage Trust, and happy to have a response from you on any of these, and thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Claire, is that the weightlifting club in Shortleys? Aye.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Mackay, and for the as I've said, challenge in our earlier discussions as well. We have, if you will remember, last year when we came forward with recommendations, we also undertook to strengthen our monitoring and compliance arrangements, and so through those we will absolutely pick up on those matters that you've highlighted in relation to the specific projects, and we are on a ever-evolving journey of supporting those projects to ensure full spend, and I can provide that detail at any time.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah. Right, so nobody else? No.
Thanks, Claire, for a great report. Just page 123 there, 123 Doon Valley Community Projects. You'll see there the CCTV camera and partner. that has been installed, but it's never worked since it's been installed. There's been connectivity problems there, I think, Ken, and been back and forward with Ian Cuthbertson, and it's still no is working as far as I know. The seats in Dunmellinton Square were all taken away and repainted and put back, but the wee plaques that was on them to the loved ones, they went missing. So they have said to me they're going to replace them, but I'm still waiting on them as well. So a couple of wee things there. But yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you for those on the ground updates, Councillor Filson, and I'll link in with Ian Cuthbertson and myself to see what we can achieve for you in there.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Okay, Jim, sorry.
Just one comment from myself again. Thanks for the paper, Claire, and I'm delighted to see the inclusion of the community groups in the panel in that as well. To be successful, groups require a cocktail of capital and revenue funding that evolves over a lifetime of the project. And I think we saw that in evidence when I visited Luga Heritage and the endeavour that certain individuals have got to go through to achieve that. And I think it's worth noting at this point, the amount of form filling for some projects that does take place and a lifetime's work for some folk to see it evolving. And I think a bit of credit goes to them at this particular time to me, having to go through that process for that cocktail of funding.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor McMahon, and I think what we're doing at paragraph 14 of the report is setting out how, in recognition of that sometimes burdensome requirement for groups, and also that the nature of that cocktail of funding is, since we came before you last August, we've pulled that collaborative effort upstream through a kind of cross-departmental test of change that we're doing. So very much hoping to have a proactive focus on finding, if indeed it's within the council, who the right person would be to help the group at that relevant age and stage of its project.
Elaine?
Yeah, I'm just looking at point 17, the final bullet point there, a fourth category criteria to be determined by the panel. So if there's any further information what that would be, it's just a bit vague. So that'd be interesting if there'd been any discussions about what that criteria is going to be. And also the second question would be the interface between the different assessment panels. So I like the idea of the community assessment panel, but I see there's some duplication between them looking at community benefit, and then it'll then go on to the officer panel, who would also look at community benefit. So what do we do if we get any discrepancies or disagreements there? So that whole interface would be very interesting. I appreciate that we might not have that knowledge. It might be through the process, but so I'm just really putting a marker down for that, for a follow-up report, that information gets fed into elected members, especially as this is a new process that's been put in place.
Yep. But
Thanks, Leader, and through you, Chair. In terms of that criteria for the community assessment panel, we were mindful that we are being deliberately community-led in that regard. So we are supporting the panel to devise what that criteria should be from their perspective, and I'm happy to certainly include that in future reports. In terms of that interface between scorings, I think our methodology is a weighted scoring system. The community panel's assessment matrix is separate, or it's independent of the senior officers matrix. However, these two things come together to provide ostensibly a total score. So any diversity of opinion will be taken into account through that scoring system.
thanks. Okay, anyone else? Okay, we'll go to recommendations then. Can we agree recommendations? Okay, now go to item 7. That's the place plans for Auchinleck, Darvel and Priestland. And David McDowell is, Karen. Karen.
Thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to request that Cabinet approve the proposed statutory supplementary guidance for Auchinleck and for Darvel and Priestland, and to seek authorisation to proceed with arrangements to adopt the guidance. Paragraphs 3 and 4 set out the background to the place plans in terms of how they sit alongside the local development plan. Paragraphs 5 to 7 set out the place plan process, and there are a number of further documents on the portal which set this out in more detail. We do work very closely with vibrant communities to undertake community engagement to help to realise a spatial interpretation of a community's community action plan. Paragraphs 8 and 9 set out that the Planning Scotland Act 2019 for the first time has introduced new legal requirements around local place plans. And moving forward, there is now a requirement for planning authorities to invite communities to prepare local place plans. And you'll see a bit more information on that in the development plan scheme, which is also on the agenda today. And we did have an interesting discussion around this on Monday at the elected members seminar on community, place, power and partnership and how this will operate going forwards. Following approval by Cabinet on the 5th of October 22 of these place plans as draft documents, the formal consultation for both of them went live on the website on Friday the 14th of October, and it ran for 8 weeks. Paragraphs 10 to 15 set out detail about the Auchinleck Place Plan. Paragraph 10 sets out the community ambitions for Auchinleck, which include developing a heritage trail to promote the diverse industrial history of the village and enhancing local attractions. There's also an ambition to develop potential gap sites as community spaces. We had 13 responses during the consultation period for Auchinleck, with comments generally being supportive, and those comments and responses are available on the portal. We've also been working with Auchinleck Community Development Initiative following their comments in terms of an active travel network, and advice has been given to them on various external funding sources and the requirement of a feasibility survey, and we continue to engage with the group. There haven't been any changes since you last saw this plan of a non-technical nature as a result of the formal consultation process. Paragraphs 16 to 19 set out detail about the Darvel and Priestland Place Plan. It focuses on key buildings and development sites in the town, which the group feel have an adverse impact on amenity. And there's also an ambition to develop sustainable regeneration projects for the town and develop tourism based on the assets in terms of cycling and walking routes in the surrounding area. We've got 22 responses to the consultation for Darvel and Priestland. Some of the key issues raised included litter, lighting, road safety, and considering future options for the Category B listed band hall on Mains Road in Darvel. And we have made a number of changes to the wording that accompanies the map accordingly. It's worth noting as well, there were several representations received regarding land allocations contained in LDP2 and specifically the site in Priestland. And as an indication of the fact that the allocations in LDP2 are not finalised yet, as the plan has not been fully adopted, the place plan detail has been amended to show that the areas zoned in the proposed plan are simply indicative of what is in the proposed plan at the moment. It should be noted that if the allocations within LDP2 are amended through the ongoing examination process, the place plans would also need to be amended in due course to reflect those changes, because the place plans need to comply with the LDP. So subject to Cabinet approval today, it would be intended that the guidance, so both place plans, were submitted to Scottish ministers, who then consider them and the representations received on them. And after 28 days, unless we hear otherwise, we may adopt the guidance. So it would have the same weight in determining planning applications as the local development plan itself does. The range of implications set out in the report, none of which I'm proposing to go through. And if we turn back to paragraph 2, there are 5 recommendations set out, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Karen. Any comments or questions for Karen? Okay, then, Maureen.
Thank you. I suppose it's really just a comment, particularly in relation to the Darvel plans. I'm just happy that we have got something that fully captures the complexity and the history that's Darvel within that. So I think that's something that's really positive, and I welcome it very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Yeah, I was up there last week and using some of their pathways, and good to see the significance of them, the walkways. But there's a lot of work going on in Darvel at the moment. Pleased to see. Just visiting with former councillor Robert Madill, who's recuperating from an illness in the wee term. So he's he's recuperating well. And he's pleased with what's going on in Darvel, so we must be doing something right. Okay, any other comments? Okay, thanks for that. And on to item 8 now, and that's the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire UNESCO Biosphere update. David again. Is that the Teflon desk there you got?
You got me 3 times today. Thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to present to you an update on the work of the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire UNESCO Biosphere and to request authority to continue and increase the Council's financial support for a further 5 years. Paragraphs 3 to 7 of the report set out the background of the biosphere, its ethos being to balance environmental protection and appreciation with sensitive business and economic activity that respects and enhances the environment of the area. This has recently been highlighted through National Planning Framework 4, which was adopted by the Government in February 2023, which recognises the biosphere designation as a crucial environmental asset for South West Scotland, which contributes to the area's future sustainability, livability and productivity. Paragraph 6 sets out that since its inception, the biosphere has provided additional value to communities, businesses and visitors within the region, and there is therein provided a number of examples of key services and projects delivered. And all this ties in really nicely to our visitor strategy and our regional economic strategy, which you've heard about before as well. Since its creation, the Biosphere Partnership and core team of officers has received an annual financial contribution from each of the 3 local authorities. That's ourselves, South Ayrshire and Dumfries and Galloway. In January 2017, Cabinet agreed a 5-year annual payment of £15,000 to provide support from 17-18 to 21-22. In March 22, we brought you a report which was approved seeking extension of the financial contribution for a single year. This 1-year extension was reflective of the timing because at that point the team were in the process of preparing the periodic review to UNESCO, which is required once every decade, and their 10-year strategic plan. And both of these critical documents are now have now been prepared. So as per paragraph 8, in September last year, the periodic review was submitted to UNESCO, which highlights the achievements of the biosphere and provides an overview of the environmental, economic and societal condition of it. It does include a recommendation to UNESCO, which we don't have news on yet, that the boundary of the biosphere should be expanded in summer this year to include the whole of Aird's Moss special area of conservation, so an extension to the biosphere in our area. So in addition to that periodic review, there's a new strategic plan developed and approved, which sets out a vision for the next 10 years, which will set the framework for subsequent work programmes and project development and how monies from ourselves, if approved, will be kind of spent and lost my words. how monies will be spent and how we can look at how well they've been spent and what we've got out of our contribution. So they have been working with officers from the 3 local authorities to establish key areas of work which would be specifically aligned to our contributions. These will be sustainable communities, biosphere towns and cross-border collaborative working. And there are a number of proposed outcomes and outputs relating to these 3 areas of focus that are detailed in Appendix 2 of your papers. And what I was trying to say was that these will be used to ensure a clear monitoring and reporting mechanism is in place, so that we have a degree of scrutiny over what the funding is achieving. And that scrutiny and reporting and monitoring will be broken down to individual local authority level, and a kind of in-kind return to the funding that it's proposed that we contribute is kind of supposed to be roughly equivalent to 23 to 1. So in terms of our existing contribution, we're contributing £15,000 a year at the moment, and there is an existing departmental budget which allows that to happen. The increased ask set out in paragraphs 11 to 12 of your report will require an additional allocation. It may be possible that the additional £10,000 is met through climate change balances, but otherwise, and thereafter, we will be using departmental underspends to meet the shortfall. So we're not asking for additional money to be allocated as it will be met through underspends. There are 5 recommendations set out in paragraph 2 aligned with this, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for that report. Anybody want to comment or any questions? No. Okay, can we agree the recommendations? Okay, and item 9 is to let Drew back in. It's Karen, not it? Just going to carry on. That's what we can do. Okay, and where are we now? The development plan scheme. I take it as you again, Karen. Yes.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present to Cabinet and seek approval for the publication of the Annual Development Plan Scheme 2023, which is a statutory requirement and sets out the timetable for preparing our local development plans. You'll be aware from reports on Local Development Plan 2 that the planning system is undergoing significant change, and paragraph 4 speaks to the level of uncertainty that this puts on the preparing a timetable, not just for ourselves, but for every planning authority in Scotland. The full scheme is in Appendix 1, but the report summarises it, and paragraphs 5 to 10 of the report set out what's been achieved in the past year, from approval of the proposed plan and associated studies to work on various pieces of guidance which have been approved by Cabinet. Paragraphs 11 and 12 set out some further detail on the remaining work on LDP2 in terms of examination and the preparation of a draft of guidance. And so with LDP2 examination, we're off on our journey for LDP3. And as is set out in paragraphs 13 and 14, this will be quite a different process to our previous 3 plans due to legislative changes. And we will be developing a 10-year rather than a 5-year plan, and the stages at which this is examined will alter. The report also contains detail on the local police plan process and aligning this with the plan making process, which will allow us to better and more fully take on board community aspirations in our next plan. And again, that kind of links back to the elected member seminar that we had on Monday and some of the discussion around better alignment of planning and community aspirations. Subject to Cabinet approval, it's proposed the participation statement be posted on the Council's website and advertised with comments invited for a 2-week period. Should this result in significant changes to the scheme being required, it will be brought back to a future meeting for approval. The production of LDP3 is a statutory function of the Council required through legislation. Its production will require a financial allocation, and it's very difficult to estimate this with any precision, particularly in light of kind of a new untested system, which hasn't been tested at all yet across Scotland, but we estimate this to be in the region of £225,000, and then that will be considered as part of the East Ayrshire Reforms report. East Ayrshire Performs, not Reforms. The recommendations are set out in paragraph 2. 6 of them, which cover the approval of the scheme, there are 6 of them which cover the approval of the scheme, consultation and the participation statement, and how balances may be allocated at a future cabinet. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Karen. Any questions or comments? Okay. Okay, we could go to recommendations. Can we agree recommendations? Okay, and we've got the extension of third sector contracts, children and young people services. Marion, been patiently by that.
Good afternoon, everyone. What we've got here is the extension of third sector contracts report. So the purpose of the report is to provide an update of the 4 negotiated East Ayrshire contracts and the joint contract with North Ayrshire Health and Social Care Partnership for Break the Silence. 4 contracts are Action for Children, Turning the Corner, and Lisa Lana, Barnardo's Family Support, and Who Cares Scotland. The recommendations are set out in paragraph 2. Paragraph 7 through to 15 sets out the background to the contracts. Key points to highlight are that this report provides an update to the Cabinet about each of the contracts. These commissioned contracts provide key supports to a number of vulnerable groups such as women and children experiencing domestic abuse, children and young people affected by drug and alcohol use, survivors of sexual abuse, children with complex disabilities, and children and young people who have come into conflict with the law. All of the contracts are in their final year of the original 3+1+1. As noted in paragraphs 13, 14 and 15, service delivery and specifications have been updated throughout the duration of the contracts to reflect changes through the monitoring and review process that we have in place and their robust processes. Paragraph 16 and 17 provide some context in relation to the aspirations of the promise, the development of family support for all, and the approach adopted by the Health and Social Care Partnership in co-designing services that communities tell us they want and need. Just moving through, paragraphs 19 through to 32 take us through each of the East Ayrshire Commission contracts, with paragraphs 33 to 37 focusing on Break the Silence. Each contract offers something different, supporting differing needs across a range of groups. The EDP provide the Children and Young People Strategic Partnership with the funding which is used to commission the Barnardo's contract. The focus of support is on children and families who are affected by alcohol and drugs and domestic abuse. Regular reviews and monitoring of the service profile the positive impact that this has had on those who access it. This contract value is £132,870 per annum. We have 2 contracts with Action for Children. Lisa Lana is funded by the Health and Social Care Partnership and provides residential respite for children who have significant additional needs. Outlined in the report is the work that's been undertaken with Lisa Lana, recognising continuing need for breaks from caring, but also the reducing demand for this locally. The annual cost of this contract is £220,934. Turning the Corner supports children who are in conflict with the law and provides intensive support to an average of 40 children annually. Again, the cost of this contract is £171,280. Who Cares Scotland provides independent advocacy support for children who are looked after and accommodated in the care of the local authority, and the value of the contract is £52,780. Finally, Break the Silence provides a much needed counselling support to those people who have been the victims of rape and sexual abuse. This contract is jointly commissioned by North Ayrshire, who lead, and the intention is to re-tender this contract in the coming year. Just going through the report, I'll take you to the implications which are set out in paragraph 38 through to 46. I think it's important to note that the service as outlined to provide support to a number of vulnerable groups. Each are in their final year, and we will use this final year to consider how best to continue using the available funds to continue support high level of needs and vulnerability in our communities. In terms of the implications, I turn you to paragraph 43, where we note that there is a reduction in the cost to one of the contracts due to a reduction in demand. So that's Action for Children, Lisa Lana, a reduction in the bed nights, which equates to 31,562 reduction. That money will be used to support children and families in terms of their self-directed sports options. I'll take you back to the recommendations which are outlined in paragraph 2. I'm happy to take any questions or points for clarification. Thank you.
Thanks, Marion. Just a bit break the silence. Just in the report we say here, you know, that I mean, I understand headquarters are based in Irvine, largely, you know, based in North Ayrshire, yet we're paying more for the service. But, you know, are we quite satisfied we're getting value for money here? And, you know, we get the same amount of, we get to kind of measure the footfall, you know, is it kind of proportionate? And are we getting to all parts of East Ayrshire? We're quite satisfied with arrangements.
Absolutely. We robustly monitor each of the contracts. In particular, break the silence just for the very reasons that you've outlined. They provide numbers of folk using the service locally and how that compares with North Ayrshire, and we're absolutely satisfied that we're in receipt of value for money, and the support that's been in place over the last couple of years has actually reduced the waiting list and waiting times for people locally to access this service. So definitely assured. Thank you.
Thanks, Marion. Okay, any other points, comments, questions? No, can we agree the recommendations? Okay, that. Yep. Got to move exclusion of press and public and ask IT to stop the recording. Can we agree that?